Starting streaming. All right. We are now live. Hello, everyone. Wow, my chair's a little bit lower. I should have raised it up. I'm having some...
You're with the two giants of functions here.
I am. Yeah, that's a great way to start this off. I am with the two giants of functions here. Welcome to the Azure Functions monthly webcast. I am Jeff Holland. I am joined here today...
with Byron Tardif.
Yeah, you've never joined a webcast before?
I think I've done the older ones when we didn't have video, so people just know my voice, probably not my face.
Sure, yeah, but like in a closet somewhere.
In a closet, yeah.
Yep, great.
I don't even remember those casts.
Yep,
Wow.
a long time ago.
And what do you work on, Byron?
Many things. I'm a man of many talents. I own all of the UI for both Azure Functions and App Service, as well as the Linux workloads for App Service, as well as the CLI for App Service.
So truly a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff.
And we brought you here today because, as folks may know, we are going to show some new UX stuff that's coming soon.
Right. This is something that we've been working on for many months. It's a partnership between both the UX team and the functions team because there's a bunch of changes that we had to do in the backend to make UI life better. And this is really hot off the press. So we're going to a Canary environment. This is the bits that we were working on yesterday. So, you know, we're live. I don't know what's going to happen.
We will see. So that's the suspense. Before we get there, our other host.
Uh-oh.
You can introduce yourself.
Oh, no. Hey, I'm Matt Henderson. I'm a program manager on the team working on security, extensibility, random experiences, which is where I guess I cross paths with this.
Yeah, historically too, you spent a lot of time with the initial kind of designs and plans and proposals.
I did, and I haven't actually seen any of it since. I missed the bug bash. I haven't played with the preview, so this is going to be like me seeing it for the first time, actually.
And you're like, hey, I designed it this way. Why did it show up this way?
I might have some questions, but we'll see.
All right, so we will get to it. We only have a very few number of slides. We're going to jump straight to showing off some of those new features. So for those of you who may not have joined a webcast before, this is our chance as a team to share what's new, what's coming. We're keeping an eye on chat. I see there's a lot of wonderful hellos. We have folks all the way from Canada, like Anthony, and we have folks all the way from South Africa. I know there were a few folks, I don't see him saying hello here, who are in Melbourne, who are maybe going to join in at 6:15 in the morning. I'm curious what time it is in South Africa, Rory. So we will keep an eye on chat, and we will be answering questions as they come in, and we'll go from there. Okay, so first off, what is new? We're going to jump through this quickly so we get to the what's coming. One new thing that shipped is if you're now deploying an HTTP trigger to a Kubernetes cluster using some of the Kubernetes tooling, we added some additional capabilities to the CLI so that it will return back to you like a URL and the key in the same way that you've probably been used to if you're using functions and you deploy it to the cloud. So just some niceties around HTTP workloads in Kubernetes. And the other big feature is actually around VS for Mac. There's a plug for the VS for Mac refresh event, which if it's not next week, it's the week after. Maybe it's in March. I don't know.
I thought it was next, but I'm not 100% sure now that you
everything's
mentioned it.
a bit of a blur for me right now. I was talking to Byron before. I know the MVP Summit's coming up.
There's a lot of stuff
KubeCon's coming up. There's this VS for Mac thing. There's
something
a
called
Xamarin event
Build.
coming. Build. Yeah, it's all... Anyway. But VS for Mac had a great update to include V3, but also some new capabilities so that you can always refresh and grab the latest templates and the latest CLI bits out of VS for Mac. That's all I grabbed since our last webcast was like 2.5, 3 weeks ago. Obviously, there's been more improvements. A lot of them are more invisible, though. Bug fixes, perf fixes, error message fixes. So with that, should we go to what's coming?
Sure.
So first one on the list, a refresh portal UX.
Right.
And with this, Byron, I'm just going to hand it over to you.
Sounds good.
Do you want to give us a walkthrough of this new portal and what people can expect?
Sounds good. Yeah. So this is the existing portal that you should all be familiar with. So this is something that we built a couple years ago. And when we built this, the framework that we use in the portal to build experiences was not quite there with the stuff that we needed for functions. So this is very much homebrewed stuff, and therefore it's very different from the rest of Azure. And that's been one of the biggest feedback points, that we want to make functions look more like an Azure resource, but keep all of the nice things that we love about the functions UI in the portal. So people are going to start seeing this in the next couple of weeks. We're going to do a very brief private preview, basically working with MVPs, making sure that we don't have any really rough edges. And then this should start rolling to public preview soon. And the hope is to have it at GA or near GA quality for build. That's the general idea.
Got it.
Very ambitious, but...
So while it's in preview, I have the choice between the two systems? Is that kind of...
Yeah. So what you will see is, by default, you will land in the old experience, the usual platform feature stuff that everybody knows. But you
this
can
is my least. This is my least favorite page. I told Byron to open this one.
Yeah, yep. I noticed you said knows, but not loves.
I know. I choose my words.
I love looking at bullet lists in Notepad.
But you have the option of clicking on this preview, and what that will do is it will open the new UI. So the cool thing is, if you don't like the new UI, you can always scroll to the left. And there's the old familiar grounds.
But what if I don't want to scroll to the left,
If
Byron?
you don't want to scroll to the left, just stay with the new experience. And the first thing that should jump here is that this looks like any other Azure resource.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's very familiar. Like, in some ways, it's like, wait, what's going on here?
And there's a couple of new things that have been added that are function specifics. So we have your function list. And this is basically where the more interesting stuff comes in, right? If you want to add a function, you add it from here. You get the list of templates that you can create. The simplest one, HTTP trigger. You get the details, and then you can go create a function. I already have an HTTP trigger function, so let's take a look at what that looks like. So now, I've gone on the portal journey, right? So I go from my main resource, which is the function app, and now I'm basically drilling down into the specific function that I'm going to be working with. Right now, the function overview is still a little bit empty. We're working on adding more stuff into that so you can see stuff. The idea is to put some metrics here that are basically drilled down to the specific function that you're looking at.
Right, and that's just something we really didn't have previously. Even.
Right.
I mean, we had the monitor tab, but that really only gave you just a little bit of information.
Right, and here it's, some people like seeing logs where there's lines, and other people like seeing graphs where you see the squigglies and you can tell whether things are going good or bad depending on the squiggly, right? So that's still improvement to be done, coming soon. The next thing is the code and test. So this is where we load the editor. And for people that like to test in the portal, you can still do that. We still have access to the execution logs. And one of the things that you will notice is that there's no more hundreds and hundreds of scroll bars when we have all of this displayed.
Ah, yes.
This is like the most magical thing.
So this is a good time to give a segue of one of the reasons why we did this refresh and rewrite, right? So there's a strong commitment to make sure that everything in Azure is very accessible. Right. So that means there's accessibility guidelines that we need to meet. So that screen readers, contrast, people that are hard of vision can use this. And the improvements that we have from the Ibiza portal, which is the functions, the framework that we use to write this, have caught up to the point where we can do all of this.
Yep.
And it's easier to do it with that than having our homebrew solution.
Right. We had our own thing since the beginning of Functions when we initially previewed it.
Right.
And that means that we haven't been taking those benefits
right.
As those things have matured. So yeah, it's certainly exciting to see a lot of those things kind of click in and also just feel more natural. Like it doesn't feel like I've transitioned outside of the context of, it's very much like app service on the main resource, right?
Right. And that's the thing. People that needed to configure a custom domain or some other Azure App Service specific feature, they still had to break the glass and end up in the menu and configuring those features. So now there's less jumping around. There's less jarring of an experience. And the things are just where you expect them to be. Yeah.
And also, I may just call out that because that blade is for the function, I can deep link to it, can't I?
You can deep link to it, yeah. The next thing.
I'm acting as if I didn't know these things from like the original.
Candidly, why Matthew was like, "I'm not demoing anything. I don't have any announcements. Why do you need me here?" And I was like, "This is why we need you here,
Well,
Matthew."
so also though, it's like it's not as if I wasn't involved in those decisions
Still,
at some
you're
point.
seeing it live.
It's for
now.
It's true.
The
It's nice.
gasps are authentic.
It is nice to see it real. I was worried it was a pipe dream.
Yeah. Now the next one is one that I'm especially proud of. You guys have been in meetings with me, and you know that I always end up drawing stuff in the whiteboard because that's how I think.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have the integrate tab, which basically is a visual representation of your function. For me, this makes it very easy to know what's coming into my function, what's coming out, and you can edit it from here. So if I wanted to add an input, I can do that from here, right? So if I wanted to, have the HTTP trigger start the function and then have the function read a OneDrive file, I can edit it directly from here. So if you have a complicated function that has a bunch of inputs, a bunch of outputs, you can visualize them and you can also edit them directly from here. Monitor, this is still pulling in our older experience. So no big changes here, but this is something that we plan on working between public preview and GA.
So what kinds of changes can we expect here?
I'm not ready to talk about those.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay.
Tune in next month.
All right.
Yep. We need to keep them coming back, right?
All right.
We're basically looking at stuff that we can do here with App Insights integration and with some new functionality that is coming from App Insights.
Great.
That's basically
what a
where
tease.
things are.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then finally, you have function keys, which, if you notice, here is scoped down to the specific function that I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm. No more host keys just suddenly popping in and things like that. And in fact, there's a place for those.
Right. If I go back to the function app itself, then I can look at app keys that has both the host keys and the system keys.
And system keys weren't exposed previously.
Right.
So this is great.
And then the final other little chunk is what we're calling app files. I'm still not super happy with this name, so it might change. But it's basically giving you an ability to edit that host.json, or if you have, I think for PowerShell, there's an additional file that you can also edit.
Like the requirements.psd one. Yeah.
So it's giving you a natural place to go make these changes, and it also makes sure that the scope is well understood, because this is something that will affect all of your functions within the function app, not just one specific function.
Right.
There's a little bit more UI in configuration when we go to the function runtime settings, where basically this is new UI. This is still work in progress, but the idea is that the function runtime settings that you already know are now exposed in configuration next to your app settings and general settings.
Got it.
So I think that wraps it up. It's a very quick tour. Oh, there's one more thing. We're looking at the overview for the function app and how to make it more useful if we can show stuff other than the metrics. So this is something that I would be really happy to hear. Look in the comments if people like this idea. We have this tabbed view where, for example, you can go into features, and the things that you should see here are, I know that I have a lot of stuff over here on the left, but what are the things that 90% of function customers are going to want to play with or toggle or use on a day-to-day basis? And basically bubbling them up over here so they're faster to get
So this is curating some of the stuff that we see people actually gravitating to and
exactly
things like that. So that makes it a lot faster to get up and running and navigating, because that's a long list of features we have in the left.
It's a long list of features. So for example, to give you an example, I expect that anybody that is using functions in production is probably going to be using some sort of CI/CD mechanism, right? So instead of having to look for deployment center over here, it's just going to be here, right? That's a very obvious example, but we're still trying to find what is the right set of features to expose that cover, what everybody should be doing.
Makes sense. Right, I probably shouldn't be relying too heavily on that nice new editor and everything that you were showing off, right?
That's right. One of the comments from Mikhail when he was like, "Hey, what's the new UI gonna have?" And he was like, "I want everything to be read-only, everything published from source control."
So that's a perfect segue for the next part that I wanted to talk about, which is the way that the old experience works is talking directly to the functions runtime, right? which is a problem when your function is hosted within a VNet, right? And it also makes it very hard for the UI to handle any errors coming from the runtime. And henceforth, you see all of those red bubbles of death that people hate in the old experience. Because this is a collaboration between the runtime and the UI team, we're exposing a bunch of those APIs from the functions runtime through ARM.
Right. We've moved actually a whole bunch of surface area into ARM, and it's a lot easier to navigate, frankly.
Right. And it also makes it so that even if your app is hosted within a VNet, we have the bridge that basically lets the UI talk to it. So you won't be seeing those, hey, can't reach the app errors.
Does this mean that my core's defaults no longer have to have all this portal stuff added to it? Oh, that's nice.
Oh, yeah, so, that's right. Functions.azure. Whatever.
Yeah.
So there's still a bunch of work to make sure that we have full coverage. But I think right now it's like 99% of all of the UI that we're writing is going through the ARM bridge. There still might be a couple of things going to the functions runtime directly, but we're working on taking those out.
Does that impact the performance of loading the portal as well?
It impacts the performance because once the API is able to go through ARM, we automatically get access to the ARM Azure Resource Graph, which basically is a layer of caching, which makes everything faster.
Nice. So yeah, I don't open a function up for a while. I don't have to wait for it to spin for a bit and then list the functions. It's just ready.
Actually, yeah, that's a really good point. Specifically, function listing required a cold start activation, right? We were actually warming up your site if you were in the consumption plan just for loading the UI.
Right.
But now that doesn't actually have to happen at all. Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah. There's some other niceties that we get, like for example, the ability to do bulk operations through the API. Where instead of having to make 17 calls to the functions runtime, we can just pass a big payload.
There you go.
Sure, yeah. So a lot of benefits there. This is great. I'm keeping an eye on chat. There's a lot of folks. Great sentiment. Everyone's really excited. They loved that integrate tab. I think that got a lot of the bigger reactions. And then kind of the sentiment is, it's nice because it does feel just like, it doesn't look too different. It's not like, this is Azure. Like this is the way I'm used to other Azure resources looking. Which is great. So lots of oohs and ahs and fire emojis and thumbs ups and excitement. So I think everyone's excited to get their hands on this. And as you mentioned, a short private preview coming up for a select bunch of individuals.
We might, open it up a little bit more depending on how feedback comes in and, paper cuts that we find along the way. But the idea is to have a public preview very, very soon.
Great. Wow. Fantastic.
And so just to make it super clear, like basically it looks like everything I have in the portal that I would normally have expected for functions is there.
Yep.
Some things are actually easier to find quite a bit.
Yep.
And they're a lot more consistent overall. So there should be, especially if you're like an app service customer, it should be much simpler to get around.
Yeah. The only thing we're taking away are scroll bars.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, and I'm looking, there's a few questions that we might get to later that aren't specific to the UX, so I'm just scanning to make sure. Actually, here's one question I think would be fine. So Gear asks, what technologies are used to develop the portal? Is it plain JavaScript, Vue, Angular? Any insight you want to give on like how we build the portal?
Sure. So there's a couple of layers. So we use a homebrew framework that is provided by the Azure portal, which is called the Ibiza framework. And that's what builds most of the menu and what we call the blade, which is basically the overview. Think of it as the bones of the view. And then once you start drilling into the specific experiences, we can build them with the framework that the portal provides, or we have another option, which is we're using React and we're iframing some of these experiences. And then with React, we use the Fabric controls that are like open source and available for anybody.
Right. Those are the controls that Office publishes that kind of encode some of the Fluent design patterns and things like that.
And that's kind of where most of the Microsoft properties on the web are orbiting towards.
Right. Yeah. So it's actually a really nice framework. Also, I'm not much of a UI dev at all, but it seems like it's pretty straightforward to use and get something that kind of looks pretty nice and kind of consistent with other Microsoft tech.
Right. That's the client side. When we look at the controller, we have a very thin controller. There's some cases where we need to coordinate between what the UI is doing and when we're talking to the Azure Resource Manager. And that is built with Node for functions. For App Service, we have a little bit of Fsharp there.
Right.
And we host that controller on App Service itself. So if we want to go into how the sausage is made, we're hosted pretty much on every region in Azure. And we also have Azure Front Door on top of that controller. So Azure Front Door acts as the way to distribute the traffic geographically. Then it reaches whatever region you're in. And then from there, it's App Service. So we're basically using our own service to provide the service.
That's just until the next iteration where it's going to be exclusively Azure Functions that are hosting all of it, right?
Eventually.
Okay, this is great. There's a few more UX-related questions. A lot of people sorrowing over the scroll bars. They're really going to miss all of them. You become very close with them. One of the questions was, let me make sure I missed this when I scrolled. I remember what it was. Someone, I think it was Barbara, if I might even have the name right. Is there still going to be a way in the new UX to download the app code?
That's something that we're still working around. There's some scenarios where it makes sense. There's other scenarios where it doesn't make sense. There's also problems with that functionality today. I think the sentiment and the idea is that we want that functionality, but we won't offer it until it's consistent and it works across the board.
Okay.
And then the last one we'll do for UX, and then we'll keep going, unless, Matthew, you see any other ones, is, will this include live metrics inside the new UX, from Mohammed?
That's something that we're trying to do in the monitoring UI.
Okay, cool, great. Do you see anything else, Matthew, before we jump?
No, I think that's most of the UI questions
Sweet.
I've seen.
So we'll come back to some of the other questions later. I know that was a lot that folks were really excited about, was seeing the new UX. Fantastic walkthrough, Byron. You're a wonderful tour guide. If you ever are interested in changing careers, but please don't.
Please don't.
That was great. Awesome. So we will come back over to what's coming. So we did the refresh portal UX. There's actually a long list of other stuff that's coming. As we mentioned, everything's in kind of a blur, so I might have even missed some things here. Java on Linux. Yeah, this is very imminent. The Maven tooling will enable you to very quickly generate a Docker file that you could then publish to the premium plan. You could just publish to Linux consumption if you want. For folks who care about the OS choice, I found Java, just because of the JVM, there aren't as many cases of like this only works here or there.
Yeah, they're a lot less sensitive to it, yeah.
Still, it's there. We're just trying to get consistency across all languages, all platforms. This is a big one. This one's coming very soon. Yes, the ability to set a maximum scale for every app across every plan. So the most common scenario we hear this is something like, I've got SQL on the other side of this function. I don't want you to scale out to 200. Maybe only scale out to 20 so that I don't tip over the SQL database. This will be coming over the next few releases to both consumption, and it's already there in premium.
Yeah, it's been in premium since the get-go, right?
Yep. So coming to consumption very soon. The code's done. We're just waiting for the rollout of the releases, which takes a while given the scale of the service. This one was there last week, Matthew. I don't know if you, or last month. Do you want to add any other notes on this one?
No change.
Great. Still coming.
Still coming.
Yeah, it's fine to have them be coming for a while. It's more just give people a heads up. Python 3.8 was there last month as well. This is something we're also working on, and Java 11. Python 3.8 will come sooner than Java 11. I think that one's pretty imminent. Java 11, I think, will probably be here on the next webcast as well as what's coming. And then finally, this was here too, durable functions in Python and PowerShell. One quick note, though, that I did want to flag, both to kind of get some discussion to. The current scope for Python is more or less just kind of how you would expect durable functions to work and how it does with JavaScript today. The PowerShell work right now has actually initially been scoped to primarily support the scenario where you want to get in something like a request to run a job, maybe over HTTP. You then want to kick off an activity that will then go run that PowerShell job that might take 10 minutes to complete. And then you want to be able to keep track of that without having to hold the HTTP request. Because if you try to do a single HTTP trigger that runs for like 10 minutes, it's going to time out after 230 seconds. I think that's the magic number.
230 is the magic number.
When our networking stack is going to be like, that's taking too long. So durable for PowerShell may just initially be a flavor of durable that lets you do long-running kind of asynchronous HTTP workloads,
Right.
but not the full durable functions orchestration API set. I'm flagging that here because we're having conversations right now, which is like, what should we call this durable functions on PowerShell? Should we do all of it on Power? Like, so that's just what's coming. I want to make sure we're being fully transparent on the scope for that.
Makes sense.
I
That's
think I
it.
have one more thing.
Add it.
Oh,
So we have hybrid connections coming for Linux workloads. So if you have a function app hosted on an app service plan running on Linux, or a premium app service plan, premium functions app service plan running on Linux, you'll have hybrid connections in preview. It's in the release. We're just waiting for it to roll out.
that's
Fantastic.
amazing. All right.
Even better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Real-time news. All right. So with that, let's switch over to community highlights, and then we'll answer some more questions here in a bit. There's quite a few here, so I have added a helpful link. If you want to follow any of these links, these are just the ones that, again, I'm not perfect at this. I perused through Twitter and blog posts that I had paid attention to in the last few weeks, and I grabbed a few. So if you want to go to any of these links, if you go to ak.ms/function/links, you can click them. You can see I actually already clicked this one right here, because the first one, which is very important, and I saw Julie on the chat as well, who is either attending or at least very interested, because I've seen her making some noise around this. Adam mentioned there is a Vancouver meetup tonight, I believe. I think it's at like 4 o'clock today. So if you're watching this and you can get to Vancouver in the next 6 hours, leave now.
Jeff, we can get to Vancouver in the next 6 hours.
So basically, if you live in Portland or Seattle or Calgary, you can make it.
Turn off this webcast and head to Vancouver. No, there's a meetup. I think it's tonight. I tried to click the link before, but I ran out of time. But it's on CQRS, which is a very cool pattern and event-driven using Azure Functions. So I wanted to plug that. You can follow the link to attend. Jonathan has been working on a great blog series around building a PR bot that is using durable functions behind the scenes. It's actually a few iterations of it. So this is a multi-part blog. I've at least read 2 parts. I don't know if part 3 is out yet. Renee had a cool blog post that was saying, hey, how do I get data, use Key Vault to help encrypt it, and then store it in Blob? So kind of like bring your own encryption, bring your own thing. Lots of bringing your own. So this was a great blog post. Alex, I didn't see this one before. This one actually was one I discovered last night.
I haven't seen this one either.
It's pretty slick. So
Okay.
Alex built an Angular app, like a single page app, using Azure Functions, and then put Azure Active Directory off in front of it. So it's like doing single page app
That's
with
pretty
off.
cool.
Who was I just oh, it was James Montemagno was just in here before we started, and he was talking about how he did a similar thing with Twitter auth in Blazor, I want to say.
Right.
So very cool pattern.
All right.
Michael, who works at Microsoft, he works with a number of function customers. He wrote a great one on private site access, really describing if you want to deploy a function that you want to lock down from all access everywhere, these are the knobs that you should turn to do it. And then the last one that I at least pulled out was from Alex, who's a cloud advocate out of Nexmo, who wrote a pretty cool tutorial on sending SMS messages with Nexmo and Azure Functions. So those were the 6 posts that I wanted to highlight. So thanks to, if you're watching, and if anyone can plug that Vancouver event who's in the chat. But people who are on their way, they can't even hear us anymore. They've already turned off the webcast and they're headed to Vancouver. Okay, great. So, last slide. Upcoming events. Next week. Yep. Next week, I am headed to Nashville to join the Serverless Days in Nashville. I'm really excited. This is the first Serverless Days I've been to since, I think Australia in September. So it's been a while since I've been to one of these events. I love these Serverless Days ones. Really cool vibe. So I'll be at Nashville. A quick plug here, Codit, who's one of our fantastic partners out of Europe, is doing a webinar that I will be helping with. It's myself and Tom, who's a fantastic MVP and Kata maintainer. So this is more just if you're interested to learn more about Kata, what it is, how it plays into event-driven workloads like doing function stuff in Kubernetes. There's a webinar that's open to anyone to sign up and join on March 12th. KubeCon in Amsterdam that we're both going to in March, end of March. PyCon, which none of us are going to.
I'll be there.
Oh, you will be there.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Wow, this is like the best one ever. So Byron will be there at PyCon as well as a few other folks in April. Serverless Days Amsterdam in May. I don't think we're going to be there. Someone from our team is going. I think Katie is planning on going.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. And then, of course, Microsoft Build, which all three of us, I imagine, will be.
Yep.
It's so far.
Come find us at the booth.
Oh, too far away to travel,
It's so
you mean?
far.
All the way across the lake.
Yeah, I know. Now that I've moved like across the
east side?
yeah, I used to be like two blocks away. It's great.
You can't bother. You're just like, I'll pass on Build. I don't need to be at the most exciting dev conference. I'll just stream it from my room. And then this is a newer one too. I've seen a lot of stuff. Integrate 2020. I think we talk about this fairly constantly every year. This is a great conference out of London at the beginning of June. I would love to attend this conference, but unfortunately this will be shortly after we're expecting a new member in my family. So I'm going to have to pass. This will be the second year in a row I will miss Integrate, which I'm very sad about, but hopefully they'll invite me back next year. Okay, so we covered all the content. Should we answer questions?
Yeah.
We ready?
Yeah, let's
all
do
right,
it.
Let's do. My scroll bar's moving like crazy. So I'm going to scroll up to the top because I know there were a few at the very beginning. And yes, this podcast studio gets used a ton now, and it makes it really hard for us to schedule these things. But that's okay. We still find the time. That's why these have started a little bit later too, is we're getting around scheduling stuff. So a lot of folks, and Matthew, if you find one, this is one that comes up often. Where can we find a t-shirt, much like the one that Byron is wearing? Fantastic question. In fact, I would say, of all the questions I received at Ignite, this was the number one question I heard, which is, how do we get one of these shirts? So the good news, if there is good news, is that I just finished placing order that Matthew approved.
Hold on.
You approved. I said, Matthew, look over the design and make sure this doesn't look like garbage. And you said, I approve. I am at fault if anything goes wrong.
None of this was said. I said I see no problems. and you have agency in your life.
I ordered a bunch of t-shirts, a couple hundred. So that's the good news. I guess the slightly less good news is that the primary purpose for these shirts is for the MVP Summit. So if you are planning on coming to the MVP Summit in March, I should have a few boxes of shirts to give out. I hope enough. Do you know how many people come to the MVP Summit?
A lot.
Because I got, I think, 300 shirts, maybe 400 across various sizes. So that's the main intent. I'm hoping we have leftover.
Yeah, and we tend to carry some around to some of these other events that we're talking about.
And that's my hope too, is that if these came in time, they won't. I would bring like a handful or so to Serverless Days Nashville, but like as we go to these other events, we'll try to have them.
Yeah.
Find us at conferences. We usually have stickers, which I'm in charge of, and sometimes we have t-shirts and other stuff.
Occasionally socks.
Yeah.
The other one too, like I have the designs for this shirt. I don't care if folks want to, like, I don't know the easiest way, but I'm fine to share out the design file, which I didn't even create. It actually was created by Simon and JT out of Australia, who initially created this, who then sent it to me that now I'm printing a bunch. But if folks are interested in just like ordering your own, I'm all for it. I don't mind. So we'll share out the design too. Okay.
Technically, the ASCII art is part of our open source core tools. So
that's true.
I was a little surprised that no one asked me throughout the process if I was doing anything like copyright. Like, do I have the rights to use this? Like when I did the shirts. But I guess it's just text art. But I've tried to create a shirt before that I think had the Microsoft logo on it actually, and they were like, "Oh, we can't print this unless you get permission." But I guess they didn't recognize how
this
important.
one has a Microsoft logo.
Yeah, I couldn't afford getting a sleeve logo. It's just the ASCII. We only have a limited events budget. Okay. Let me see. Matthew, if you see any, feel free to jump in. I'll keep scrolling
some
down.
things that we already got. Live metrics. I see Anthony was answering a couple questions around durable, which is great. There was a question around the managed identity connection string support for bindings that I think is really interesting. Sort of is the answer to that. So we're working with the Azure SDK teams and a couple other folks to kind of make this a little bit more of a consistent experience across the board. But the general sense is that is the direction things are heading in. It will be incremental. So for the messaging SDKs, I believe, is current scope, and I believe the V12 storage SDKs also have this available.
Oh, that would be amazing. I really hope so.
Then you'll be able to specify that connection string setting, and things will just kind of magically light up there, with the exception of the triggering components. So this is something that we're going to have to work through on the function side to kind of make everything come together nicely. But in general, things are moving in a good direction where we can get rid of secrets, which is not my top mission in life, but it is certainly on my top. It's on the list. It's up there.
Agree. Yeah, this is one that I ended up getting into hot water unintentionally because, to Matthew's point, like for service bus and event hubs and Hope, I would love it at V12 storage. You can provide a connection string, which I discovered through someone's blog that I should have plugged in this webcast. You can kind of create a connection string, which is use managed identities more or less, and it will use it. That should work fine today, except for triggering, because triggering requires a separate component that doesn't scale to 0, like your app may scale to 0 that can monitor those sources.
Yeah.
What I did discover, though, is that there is capability in the premium plan that makes this just work today.
Yes, it does.
So specifically, if you go to like the premium plan networking doc, there's a section in the docs which is like, hey, if you have a trigger behind a VNet, enable this feature which will let us monitor your trigger source not in this weird place. So you run a CLI command, and it lets you do that. That also works for managed identities. So you can do managed identity triggering only in premium plan. And I want to emphasize this. This is not because we sat around and we're like, we should do the security feature and make it a premium feature. It was just that we discovered this thing, and then someone was like, hey, we have this other way to trigger in the premium plan. Would that just work? And so I tried it, and it just worked. And I got really excited. So I sent a tweet, and everyone was like, why are you doing a premium only feature? We will get around to bringing this into other places. But if you're extremely impatient, it just happens to magically work because of this feature we had to do.
Yeah, I would say that the premium thing is a happy accident, and we're very grateful for it. It unblocks a lot of folks.
Yes. We worked really hard and planned for it for 6 months before we got to it. So
yeah, it was a case though where I was with a customer, a large customer, and they're like, we really want to do VNet or we want to do managed identity triggering, and I kind of went to it, Matthew. I was like, we're working towards it. And then 3 days later, I was like, actually, I worked all weekend.
and specifically, like if we're in the context of bindings and things like that, I mentioned the V12 storage SDK. That's not actually part of the binding setup today. So if you're looking at like triggers and bindings from functions, it's just the messaging services that are going to get there. So your event hubs, your service bus.
Perfect. Okay, I have another question, but I don't know if you do, Matthew.
Let's see. I've seen a bunch of Fsharp mentions, which is always fun.
Sure.
So I think there's plenty of opportunity there to work on Fsharp content and things like that. So by all means, if folks want more of that, let us know, and we can see about that.
Yeah, I think the kind of the answer for Fsharp, it kind of remains the same. We have our templates repo, which does have Fsharp project templates.
Right.
It's not yet integrated to the Visual Studio tooling.
Yep.
We relay these asks to the Visual Studio team from time to time that we would love to see this included there as well, but no updates right now. So the other one I have is, will there be an option to get single IP for consumption functions? And I assume this is single outbound IP, because the scenario, at least I come in contact with, if folks are like, hey, I'm going to call MongoDB, but I'm going to set MongoDB to only accept requests from this IP address. Now, I know in discussions I've had with folks on our team, there's always a little bit of concern, which is whatever IP address I set there, ideally there's more security than just IP allow listing, but I won't get into that specifically. I guess the short answer is nothing imminently planned for consumption functions. Yep. There is some work that's related to a bunch of the stuff that makes VNets work that might make this possible sooner in the premium plan. Yeah. Definitely an important scenario that we're keeping track of, though.
So I can add a little bit more to that. When you're talking about single IP, there's two things, the incoming and the outgoing. To control the outgoing, you need to be on a VNet, which is the main hurdle to having it in the consumption scenarios. Sure. And the second part is, once you have it on a VNet, you need to basically configure an additional component that will let you make that single endpoint. Because otherwise, you're using any of the potential IP addresses that app service uses for outgoing. And that is something that is coming for app service hosted stuff in general in the next coming months.
Yep, perfect.
So That is a complaint that we get for both app service and functions. It's going to be solved for scenarios where you're on dedicated compute, so either the premium functions or the functions hosted on an app service plan. And then we'll have to cross the bridge of how do we get consumption in a VNet before we can solve it for consumption scenarios.
Yep, makes sense. And in a related vein, there's a question here around regional VNet integration, being in preview for Linux and things like that. I don't actually have context on this one, so.
So I think this is talking what we internally called Swift VNet. So I think that is currently in preview for both Windows and Linux. The plan is to get it to GA for Windows very, very soon.
But Linux might still be in preview.
Linux, there's still a couple of things that we're working through to get it out, but the hope is, in the next couple of months.
Cool. And this is just an aside. I'm seeing another question around just in premium and things like that. I think there's a couple of folks asking questions around pricing and things like that.
Yes, I saw that. So the good news is premium used to not show up in the pricing calculator at all. It now shows up in the pricing calculator as of about 2 weeks ago, but there was a small bug in that it doesn't let you set the scale out size to 0. So it's there, it's easier. We've got a few things in the works though around pricing calculator, including adding clearer examples to the pricing page itself, improving that pricing calculator so it works consistently. And we're continuing to explore more. So definitely an area of investment. And before I forget to, Julie clarified something extremely important. You don't have to drive to Vancouver to attend this event. If I'm reading this right, Julie, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, they will post a link so that you can stream it online. So Julie said she's going to attend virtually. So I am hoping that this is correct. So potentially everyone can participate in this event tonight. So yes. There's a few other questions on how to get started, how to get started with functions, how to use Redis and Python functions. I think for the sake of time, there's nothing specific here we'll add, but they're great questions. I'd encourage you to continue to reach out to the community and see what folks can add. This one, I don't remember, Byron, if you mentioned this. Hari asks, any idea when app service regional VNet integration will go GA?
So that's what we just
That's the very, very soon.
Thank you. Sorry, I got distracted, and we had a few bots in the chat,
Yeah,
too.
we did.
I had to moderate some. We're getting so popular now we actually have bots. Way to go. I'll bet they're Lambda bots. Okay. Okay. That's all the questions I saw. So if we missed any questions, this is the final call out. You've got about 30 seconds to paste them back in. But this puts us at about 45 minutes, which is more or less the sweet spot. Any other plugs or anything else anyone wants to mention before we sign off? Things people should be aware of?
Oh, it's a thing that it's a minor thing that I'm super excited about. But we're restructuring the docs, and it's just so much easier to navigate around triggers and stuff like that. Like all the binding references, like kind of slow. Like we're kind of working through each one, and I'm really excited for folks to be able to use that. It just feels a lot more, at least to me, a lot more useful. I've had a lot more success getting the particulars I need and things like that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic call out that I'm actually even going to show this because this is a really good call out. And something else I wanted to mention, as much as I want to thank the community, which I do, because the community is fantastic. There are a lot of folks on kind of the extended functions team.
Yeah, like shout outs to Craig who's been driving this.
Yeah. So one way this shows up, like if I just come to the Visual Studio Code quick start, just the fact that here I can switch between language and then it gives me a specific one. And what Matthew is talking specifically about as well is if I come down here to something like Blob, it's getting nice and restructured. So for one, it's broken up into a bunch of stuff here. But if I come into like the trigger doc, this feature, as silly as it sounds, this was like a year of us begging and pleading.
A year is being very generous, Jeff.
Because look at this amazing, innovative experience where I can say, I want the Python version of this, or I want the C# version of this, and that it switches context based on the language that I want to use.
Yeah, there's a lot of just quality of life improvements here, and I just think it's just an exciting thing that I think hopefully just makes functions that much easier to use.
Yep, and I saw like some of our user researchers, like Miriam, were tweeting yesterday, like seriously, some incredible folks in Microsoft who don't always get the chance to come on webcasts like this, who deserve some thanks as well. And thanks everyone for your participation. It's great to see how many people joined today. Hopefully that was useful. If you have questions, maybe you're watching the recording, you can always reach us at Azure Functions on Twitter. It's probably the easiest way. We will have another one of these next month. I'm hoping to align it with the MVP Summit, but I need to figure out scheduling. And I know we have a lot of MVPs who would love to join the webcast, but we have a lot of MVPs who would love to join the webcast. So I have to sort that out as well. But I'll be creative. If anyone has any ideas on how we could maybe include some of that in our next month's webcast, I'm open to it. With that, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you all.
Okay, I will sign off.